What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, I'm going to talk about free hit for Game Week 37, go through the draft that I've come up with, and also talk about other players in each position that you might want to look at as well. So if you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a like, hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. Let's get into it. So let's start with the defensive players first of all. Now, as always, when I put a free hit draft together for a double game week, there are no single game week players whatsoever. I think you could maybe make a case to have a single game week defender on the bench like Branthwaite or Tarkowski or Aït-Nouri, someone like that. But in the 11, there is no way I'd have any single game week players. Yes, Salah, Saka, Havertz, etc. are nice options this week, but they are not better, in my opinion, than any of the double game week players. Now, one player that people are going to notice isn't in this draft, who feels like the most essential player right now, is Vardiol from Man City. I definitely think he's a good option, and I'm going to talk about players that aren't in this draft as well, so other options you could consider. But it's all about that putting the puzzle together, right? If you want three Man City attackers, you can't also have one of their defenders. So I really rate Vardiol this week, even though it's 2 away games. He just doesn't make the draft because I've gone for 3 attackers instead. In goal, I've gone for Vicario. I think Petrovic is definitely an option, so is Ederson. But for me, but having 2 home games and one of them being Burnley is quite nice. Obviously, Spurs haven't done well recently, and I don't rate their defence that highly anyway. But obviously, they are the stronger team out of them and Burnley, and at home is definitely an advantage. And there's just not really any other goalkeepers that I'd want to put in that from teams that I haven't already tripled up on, essentially. So Onana's on the bench, but Man United have got so few fit defenders, I'm just not sure I would want to put him in. But if you didn't want to double up on the Spurs defence, then you could definitely play Onana. I just wouldn't touch any Brighton goalkeeper. Do I think Verbruggen will probably play both of the games in double game week 37? Yes. Is it worth the risk? No. I've got triple Newcastle, I've got triple Chelsea, I've got triple Man City, so I can't choose any other goalkeeper. So it almost just defaults to Vicario. And then with the back 3, I've gone for Davern from Newcastle. He's definitely the most nailed defender in that team. Yes, you could go for Livramento if you wanted to take a bit more of a punt. We can wait for an update on Trippier before deciding that. But right now, if I had to pick one, it's Davern. And I actually don't mind the Newcastle defence this week. They've also got quite a few injuries at the moment. But actually, that team overall is quite well organised. They played well against Burnley. I wouldn't say they were unlucky to concede, but it was from a set piece. And Burnley didn't have a huge amount of chances outside of that. And although Brighton won against Villa, they still only scored 1 goal. That was from a rebounded penalty. They're not scoring a lot of goals at the moment. So I don't mind Brighton at home, Man United away for Davern. He's also got a little bit of goal threat from set pieces as well. From Chelsea, I've gone for Cucurella. Colwill is back. He didn't get any minutes off the bench in their last game in game week 36. Trying to remember who it was against. West Ham, right? So Cucurella looks like the most nailed Chelsea defender that's also got a chance of getting you some attacking returns as well. I know Chalobah is another player that people like, but I think I would just go for Cucurella right now, Forest away and Brighton away. And again, there's not really any other defenders I prefer from teams where I don't already have the triple up. So Dalot, for example, is an option, but obviously Man United are just decimated with injuries. And you could go for someone like Dunk instead, but Newcastle away, I just don't see a clean sheet. And Chelsea at home, Chelsea just playing so well at the moment, I would expect them to score in that game as well. So Dunk is on the bench alongside Veltman, but I don't think I'd play either of them over Cucurella. And then I've gone for Pedro Porro, and that is the double up on the Spurs defence. I think with Spurs, a lot is riding on that Burnley at home fixture, and I just see Man City at home as a bonus where you hope they don't get absolutely smashed and start getting minus points. But obviously, Porro can get you attacking returns. Vicario can get you saves. So on a free hit, I think I would almost certainly go for that unless you wanted 2 Spurs attackers, which is definitely an option. Because if you think about who the strong defences are that don't have a double, well, Everton against Sheffield United at home is great. But is that much better than Spurs against Burnley at home? And then Spurs have the extra fixture as well. And it's similar with Arsenal, right? I really rate Arsenal defence, as I'm sure you know by now. But Man United away feels like a good time to bet against them and just pick up that Burnley at home fixture. So I actually quite like the Spurs double up, although it is partly because I just don't have any other options because I'm tripled up on teams' attacks. Like, if you were willing to go without Gordon or Isak, for example, maybe you go Burn and Livramento, but I just don't think many people are going to want to leave those kind of players out. In terms of other defenders, I've already kind of mentioned most of them. So Vardio at Man City, you could go Kyle Walker instead if you wanted to, but at the moment it does feel like Vardio is the one in that position. He's playing almost like a left winger, right? Left midfield, whatever you want to call it. It's a little bit scary to go without him. I think you have to decide, essentially. I would always work backwards, put the players in that you definitely want in the 11, and then see what spaces you've got and which teams you have free. Like, if you're happy to go with double City attack, I would definitely pick up Vardio instead of Ederson. Man United, the only option is Dalot. I just don't think Wan-Bissaka is attacking enough. And if you just look at the Man United injuries, it's absolutely crazy. Like, Johnny Evans might be back, but if he's not, there are no fit centre-backs in that Man United team. Maguire, Lindelof, Varane, Martinez, Camboila are all out. Malassi's been out all season. Obviously, Luke Shaw might get back at some point before the end, but it's unlikely to be for Game Week 37. So I'd probably just ignore Dalot. Newcastle, Livramento. There's kind of speculation that Trippier could be back in the squad this week. And if that's the case, he may even play the second game of double Game Week 37. Now, it could be that Livramento just moves to left back, and it's as simple as that. And a lot of people think that will be the case. But Lewis Hall has also played pretty well, and he's obviously more of a natural left back. So I don't mind the Livramento punt, and the closer we get to 37 without Trippier getting minutes, I think it looks good. But if you want that security of starts, it's definitely got to be Dan Burn. And then from Spurs, if you really just don't trust Pedro Porro, or maybe you've got a different goalkeeper and you want to go for a double up from the Spurs defenders, then it's got to be Romero or Van de Ven. I would completely ignore Emerson Royale. I wouldn't be totally surprised if he came out with that 11, although they don't have a huge amount of other options. Van de Ven would just be for those people with a smaller budget. And then Romero, I would pick over Van de Ven because his goal threat is just a little bit high. So few defenders to choose from. But I think Cucurella, Dan Burn, and Porro looks pretty good, depending on what attackers you want. So for this draft, I've gone for a 3-5-2 formation, but you could absolutely play 3-4-3 instead if you wanted to. I've actually got Nicholas Jackson on the bench, but the form he's in over the last couple of game weeks, I'm sure a lot of people are going to want to play him, and that is absolutely fine. I think he's a great option. The 5 midfielders I've picked are Palmer, Son, Gordon, Foden, and De Bruyne. For me, I'm pretty sure if I was free hitting this week, I would definitely have Palmer and Son, the two most nailed attackers in their respective teams, who are also both on penalties as well. Like, Son hasn't played great recently, and again, against Liverpool, up until the point that Richarlison came on and Son moved back to the left, he hadn't played that well, but he still went and got a goal. And partly that is because he's always on the pitch. He very rarely gets subbed early. And I'm pretty confident Richarlison's going to start against Burnley as well, which is the key fixture for Spurs in the double. And if that happens, Spurs just overall going to look a lot better. When Richarlison and Maddison came on against Liverpool yesterday, it did kind of... I mean, the game was probably already won for Liverpool, so there might be an element of that. But I did think Spurs looked better. And I think both of those two players will play against Burnley, and that's going to help Son as well. So he would definitely be in. Cole Palmer, I don't think really needs too much explanation. He's just been absolutely ridiculous. If you want a second Newcastle attacker alongside Isak, who most people are going to have, Anthony Gordon is almost certainly the one. His minutes are fantastic. And the thing I like about him is when you saw the Burnley match at the weekend, Wilson went off first, then Isak, then Gordon played through the middle, and at that point he would have almost certainly been on penalties as well. So it's just very hard to back against him. Like, there's plenty of midfielders you could go for that are slight punts and stuff like that, but as a solid option, it's really hard to look past Anthony Gordon. I haven't included Bruno Fernandes in this draft because he is a doubt at the moment. He's obviously yellow flagged. I'm pretty sure he's just going to play against Crystal Palace, but he does seem to be a genuine doubt. And if that carries into Game Week 37, I just don't think you can go for him. And that's also going to be a nice advantage for free hitters in 37 because a lot of people will already have Fernandes in their team and then possibly have to spend a transfer on him. But let's see. If Bruno's fine for 37, then absolutely, if you've got the money, you could pick him over any of these midfielders, really, but especially someone like Anthony Gordon or possibly even Kevin De Bruyne. But Gordon, as a value solid pick, is just fantastic. His numbers are good, minutes are good. There's not really too much to dislike about him. And then I've gone for the double up on the Man City midfield with Foden and De Bruyne. Now, we've discussed these two players a lot over the last couple of game weeks. I think they're actually very close in terms of FPL picks and overall points. De Bruyne is still slightly lower owned. So if you've got the money, you only want to go for one, and you want to try and push for mini league or overall rank or something like that, then De Bruyne is probably the one. But Foden is just as good for less money. So a lot of it might come down to budget. And of course, if you wanted to go for Vardiol, then one of those two players is who you would drop. And that's where the kind of dominoes start falling. So let's say that we get rid of Phil Foden because we want to go for Vardiol. Then you could just switch Porro to Vardiol and Foden to Richarlison. But obviously, if you want to keep Porro and you put Richarlison in, you've then got to swap the goalkeeper, which means you've got to be happy to go for Onana. So you just have to put together an 11 that you're comfortable with. But for this one, I've gone for the double up on City attack. Other midfield options you could go for: Fernandes, obviously I've just mentioned if he's fit. Garnacho as well, if you're struggling for budget, I still really like him as an option. His minutes look great. He's very cheap, super attacking as well. I just don't see Garnacho as he's not an issue, right? Obviously, there was a stage where everyone was bringing him in. He was doing great. That's not been the case recently, but I still look at him as a great value player. And I think around that 5 million price point, he is the one that I would go for on free hit if you're really struggling for funds. For Spurs, Johnson is continuing to get good minutes, but I don't think I would go there. I think it's just too risky still. Richarlison is the interesting one. He didn't start against Liverpool, which I don't think is a good thing, right? I would have preferred to see him get good minutes ahead of the double. So there is clearly still some fitness issues there, I would say, because obviously Spurs played on Thursday and then had to play Liverpool on Sunday. But I do think he'll start against Burnley. And again, that is the key fixture from the two games that Spurs have. So if you get kind of 70, 80 minutes in that game and then maybe 20, 30 minutes off the bench against City, that might be worth it. And there is obviously an outside chance that he'll start both of those games as well. It is quite a quick turnaround for Spurs in 37. They play on Saturday at 3 o'clock, and then they play the City game on Tuesday at 8 o'clock in the evening. So there is a chance Richarlison will get benched for one of the games, but I just think it's more likely to be the Man City game. So as a punt, like if you're looking for differentials that a lot of people not free hitting won't have, I think Richarlison is one of those kind of key players. Other options: Brighton, Gross and Adingra. I mean, they're both probably going to start. I think Gross will definitely start both games, or at least like there's a 99% chance of it happening. And Adingra's minutes are good as well. Brighton attack just not really clicking at the moment. I will say against Villa, who were poor, by the way, Adingra was really good. I would call him lively. Didn't have a huge amount of clear-cut chances, but was involved a lot. And maybe is a good cheap option instead of Garnacho. But I think overall, like if you've got the budget, there are definitely 5 better midfielders. And if you want to take a punt on Chelsea outside of Parma, then it's got to be Madueke. Obviously, Nkunku's back now. He was on the bench in the last game. I think he's more likely to come in and play instead of Mudryk. I think Madueke's minutes are pretty safe at the moment. He's definitely not a better option than Palmer. But for those of you that really want to try and push to get up the ranks or whatever it might be, Madueke looks quite nice from Chelsea. So again, only a few options in midfield, but I've chosen this 5. Palmer, Son, Gordon, Foden, De Bruyne. Looks pretty nice to me. And then the 2 forwards that I've picked are pretty straightforward. I've gone for Haaland and Isak. And if I was free hitting this week, those 2 would be absolutely locked in. The only real decision you need to make is whether you want to play with 5 midfielders or 3 forwards, and then who that third forward is. I think Nicholas Jackson is pretty clear as the next best option, but there are other players that you could go for. But right now I've got Nicholas Jackson first bench. Haaland obviously shown what he can do in a single game week this week against Wolves. Now he's got 2 fixtures. And obviously there is a massive element of luck having a player with 4 goals, gets 2 penalties all in one match. But I just think going without Haaland is pretty... I would say it's crazy in a double game week where you're free hitting. Even if you're quite far down in your mini league, or you really want to push for, you know, a better finish, like in terms of overall rank, I would just still put Haaland in, and I would just differentiate with the captaincy instead. So maybe go for a Palmer, Son, Isak, something like that. I wouldn't completely take him out of the team. I just think that would be, I don't know, I don't think it would be good for people's sanity. And he's almost certainly going to start both of those games as well. Isak is still the pick of the Newcastle forwards, although you could make a case for Callum Wilson. But I just think minutes-wise, Isak looks great right now, and he's the more likely to start both of those fixtures in 37. It's definitely possible that Wilson could as well, but I wouldn't be surprised if Wilson gets one start and then maybe is benched in the other game and Isak starts both of them. Isak didn't play 90 minutes this week against Burnley, but he still got 76. And obviously the game was pretty comfortable at the point that he came off. Like, Wilson had already been subbed at that point. So obviously Eddie Howe was just resting players. The only slight dent in Isak's appeal is Callum Wilson. Because I think when he's on the pitch, he's more of the focal point, and Isak tends to drop a little bit deeper, although we still had chances against Burnley and still scored. And also, the fact that Isak has missed that penalty, where I would have expected Wilson to take it, means Wilson is almost certainly going to take the next one when they're both on the pitch. So for Isak to be on penalties now, it's going to require Callum Wilson to be on the bench. So I do think Isak's appeal has been slightly dented to where it was a few weeks ago, but not enough to ignore him on a free hit. I think he's a pretty solid pick. And Newcastle attack looking very good right now. And Brighton at home, good fixture. Man United away, definitely a good fixture. Maybe by that point, Man United will have some players back, but I really wouldn't count on it. So Isak would be a lock for me. Obviously, with other defenders, like I've already said, Nicholas Jackson is first bench. You could definitely go for him if you wanted to. And then really, there's only three other choices. That's Højlund at Man United. For me, that is just a massive punt, really, where you really want to go different because he hasn't looked fantastic recently. Obviously, stuff like form and that can change, very quickly. But Højlund is just not a very inspiring pick. Doesn't have penalties or anything like that. I mean, maybe if Fernandes and Rashford were both missing, he might take them, but that's a stretch for me. So I'd probably ignore him. Brighton, João Pedro, I don't mind again if you need a cheap option because your team value is low. Like, his minutes are looking good right now. Brighton haven't scored a huge amount of goals, but that could change at some point. He's also on penalties, although maybe not after the miss at the weekend, although he did score the rebound. They do have Pascal Gross, who can take penalties as well, and he's a pretty good taker, but it's not like he's a Ivan Toney or a Bruno Fernandes with them. So I think João Pedro will probably keep penalties. So he's a nice budget option. And then obviously you've got Callum Wilson. Now, we had a similar situation around about this time last year where a lot of people had Isak, and all of a sudden Wilson started getting minutes, and he absolutely smashed Isak. I think in a double game week, I can't quite remember. And I do think he's going to start at least one of the games in 37, possibly twice. He's going to be on penalties. He usually plays as the central number 9 that's the most forward, like pretty much the target man. I quite like Callum Wilson as a punt. Again, it really comes down to how much you want to push it, because to put Callum Wilson in this team, you've got to drop one of those midfielders. And I can't really sit here and tell you that he's better than any of those. I just don't think he is, right? If I had to put my own money on who's going to score the most points this week out of Palmer, Son, Gordon, Foden, De Bruyne and Wilson, I'm probably betting on any of those midfielders before Wilson, but you just never know. You just never know. And if you wanted to take out Gordon instead, I really don't mind that. You just have to be the kind of FPL manager that can do those things knowing that it could go wrong, just like with any decision you make, but maybe more so with a player whose minutes are slightly risky, because right now I can say with almost 100% certainty Gordon's going to start both of those games. I can't say that about Wilson, but he's so good that maybe it won't matter, right? Maybe one start and one appearance off the bench for 20-30 minutes could be enough. And I think it's a really similar discussion with Richarlison. Like, you could, instead of this team I've got right now, you could absolutely, instead of Porro and Gordon and De Bruyne, you could go for Vardy, Richarlison and Wilson. And I don't think that would be a terrible team. And you've got two nice differentials in there in Wilson and Richarlison that can do damage, even in maybe slightly more limited minutes. So you still get the solid picks of Isak, Haaland, Son, Palmer and Foden. You just ditch Gordon and De Bruyne instead. I mean, De Bruyne, is he guaranteed to start twice in 37? No, I think he probably will, especially if he gets taken off early against Fulham, but it's not a guarantee. So I don't mind dropping De Bruyne. But this is it. You got to just do whatever you're comfortable with. Essentially, the players I've got in this squad and the other players that I've mentioned, that is, to me, the pool of players that you're picking from. And if you choose 15 players from those, you probably can't go massively wrong. And then, like always, you've just got to hope for a little bit of luck. And look what happened in free hit 34. Nearly every single player, it felt like, absolutely smashed it. Maybe it'll be the case this week as well. Let me know down in the comments below what you would do differently with this team. If you've enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a like. Hit that subscribe button, rate 5 stars if you're listening on podcast. I'll be back tomorrow with transfer tips, talking about players you might want to bring in or take out ahead of the double game week. So I'll catch you then.